Okay, so I said I would do like a Q&A type thing. So I have some questions here. I'm gonna go through them, and yeah, maybe I'll try to put timestamps in the comment section or something like that. I don't know how this works because this is different than YouTube. So, anyways, maybe I'll throw this on YouTube too, um, just so people have access to it in a different format where they can click for the timestamps. First question is about hip stability, FAI, and health of the pelvis and low back for barbell athletes. So I think the way to discuss this best is, I'm not a medical doctor, so I can't give medical advice, blah, 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 that whole thing. But if I talk about my own experience, that's just my own experience. That's not medical advice. So I had FAI, and I put that in past tense because I don't have any symptoms of it now. And the way that I managed to fix that, first off, I recommend everyone looks up the FAI fix. You have GotRom, GotROM.com, and Upright Health. Those are the two websites I recommend. They have a program called the FAI Fix. Really, honestly, I could just put it there and just tell you guys follow that, and that would do everything for you. However, that would be incomplete. So the very first thing you need to figure out is, why are you having the hip issues in the first place? So is it because you're weak? Is it because you're inflexible? What is the problem there? Is it a mobility issue or is it a stability issue? So for me, I'm hypermobile, and so I tend to, this is terrible, but I tend to just bottom out whenever I catch cleans and snatches, because I'm just super flexible. So, I catch a clean and I ride it all the way down till I, boom, hit the absolute bottom. My butt will literally touch the back of my shoes, and then I bounce out. And that's great, except that I have this part where my acetabulum crashes into my femur. So that's not great. So the very first thing I had to do actually was trying to reduce my depth, which is something that's probably not part of this question. I realize that this was not asked, but I'm going to tell you that you need to figure out how you're lifting and why you're having this in the first place. So, if you're doing back squats and you just drop to the bottom and crash out, then there's your problem right there. So when I catch cleans, I bottom out and bounce out. So for me, one of the very first things I did is I changed my technique, and I try to catch every snatch and every clean as high as I possibly can. That's even when I'm below parallel, I still try to catch it above, instead of just dropping all the way to the very bottom of my range of motion, I try to catch as high as I possibly can, which sometimes only means that I'm catching a half inch higher than my absolute bottom range of motion, but that half inch is the difference between my femur hitting my acetabulum and my femur landing here and having space. So I realized that, oh, it sounds like it's so small. You still look like you're at the bottom. Yes, I look like I'm at the bottom, but I haven't actually bottomed out, which is why my femur doesn't crash into the acetabulum and pinch the labrum. So there's the first thing you want to focus on. After that, I hate admitting this because, me, I love barbell squats, whether it's front squats or back squats or whatever, but I did a ton of single leg work. Whether that was terminal knee extensions. I know lots of people were like, don't do terminal knee extensions, it's teaching you to extend the hip with your quad, but the reality is that you've got a problem. This is a rehab exercise. So terminal knee extensions, box step-ups, and start off with a low box and work your way up to a higher and higher box, because let me back up for a second. First thing to do, stop doing movements that make it irritated and inflamed. Because you got to let some of that inflammation go out. So don't do movements that hurt. So start off with the low box and do box step-ups, and then slowly work up to a higher and higher box doing box step-ups. Bulgarian split squats. I hate to even admit this one because Dan John says to never do lunges, but do lunges. Do reverse lunges, and you guys can actually start these off on the floor, because it'll only bring your hip to it's not truly even 90 degrees. You probably won't have an impingement there because your femur and your acetabulum like this rather than a squat where you're driving your femur way up because you're dropping your ass below your knee. And then eventually you can progress your lunges until you're stepping up onto a box or you're stepping backwards off of a box, whatever you want to do with that. But basically you're going to do it with your front foot elevated. And then lots of hip circles type stuff. So I know people make fun of me for this. I don't know why. I guess because it's not what they want to do. Do some goddamn clamshells. I've been telling people over and over again, like, you have a problem with your glute minimus. That's why your hips are weak. It's very hard to target your glute minimus. I don't care if you deadlift a lot. To really target the glute minimus, you need movements like starting off with clamshells. I know, oh, it's such a dumb exercise. I feel like Jane Fonda. Yeah, well, that's cool, but like, we're interested in lifting the biggest weights possible, so you're going to do the little things because the little things matter. So start with clamshells, then you can get yourself something like a hip circle and do like lying banded hip openers. So you're really just going to lay on your back, put the band around your knees, and then just keep opening your legs over and over and over again. You will feel this in your glutes. If you don't, bend your knee. So, if you can picture this, you're laying on your back, bring your legs up like you're holding like a squat, right? So your feet are elevated. You're literally just, if you're on your back, these are your feet, these are your knees. It comes down to your hip, and your body's that way. You're going to open your hips up, right? With the band around them. You will feel that in your glutes. So there's what you want to do for your hips. From there, include some RDLs. I think RDLs are fantastic. I think that everyone should be doing RDLs on a regular basis. Your low back is so important. Good mornings and Kang squats. Yes, Kang squats. And start them light. Like, I am not trying to get a 1 rep max Kang squat. So even if it's 45 or 55 pounds on the barbell, do sets of 10, 15, 20 in the Kang squat, and you will feel your low back getting stronger. So those are the movements I like for the low back, and I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. Obviously, if you have tons of money, go get yourself a reverse hyper and a back extension and all this other stuff like that. But like, I'm a guy who literally does everything with just a barbell. Like, most of the time I don't even use a squat rack. I'll just clean the weight and then squat it. So, that's the best way for you to approach this, is first figure out what's the problem. Is it a stability problem, like you're weak, or is it a mobility, flexibility type issue, and address those things. And then from there, you want to strengthen and also strengthen your low back and your glutes, because if you have weak glutes, then you have poor pelvis control, and if you have poor pelvis control, then you're more likely to have your acetabulum tip forward, and so you want to correct those things. And your hamstrings are probably weak too, so you should be training your hamstrings. Everyone should be training their hamstrings, and I recommend even like the Louis Simmons type stuff, where you just take a band and do hundreds of hamstring curls with a band. That's a great way to make sure you have healthy hamstrings. Alright, that was a little long, but I hope that helps, and if I need to clarify, just comment below and I'll try my best to clarify. Second question, do you track micronutrients and macronutrients? What was your analysis of its effectiveness and implications? I do not track anything now, but certainly whenever I had to make weight for fighting, I did track. I tracked macros. I had an entire spreadsheet where I didn't just track macros, I tracked the calories. So, this is before IFYM was a cool thing. I actually tracked calories, which to me is just, it's like, let's split hairs. I know I ate 400 grams of, carbohydrate, so, my spreadsheet actually just says 1,600 calories of carbohydrate, you know what I mean? So in any case, so I tracked calories, but it's the same difference, and that was how I made weight. That's all there is to it. Outside of fight camps and having to make weight, I've never tracked. I don't bother to track numbers. I keep track of what I eat. Like I'll sit down and write down that I had, you know, 16 ounces of steak, or I had 8 ounces of chicken breast, or whatever it is, and you know 8 ounces of broccoli and 5 rice cakes. Like I don't even bother writing down the grams or anything. I literally will write down like, oh, I had 5 rice cakes. But that's that's the extent of my tracking. So outside of very specific circumstances where I had to make weight, no, I don't bother tracking all that stuff. As far as micronutrients, I played around with some different apps at different points in time. It's very hard to track macros, and I feel like maybe some of the numbers are off. It's like you put in a steak, and like you get these weird numbers, and I know that the steaks have iron in them. Like I know that I'm getting like B vitamins and those things for whatever reason. Some of the apps they don't add up. So as far as I'm concerned, it's not really worth doing. I think it was like Optimizing Nutrition or something like that. Marty Kendall, Optimizing Nutrition, and there's a chronometer or something like that. I'd use that. I wasn't impressed with it. So that was my experience with those. As far as effectiveness, obviously tracking calories is effective for making weight. That's what I can say about that. But like I'm not going to sit here and preach something like people need to do this, because my blood work was absolute shit during fight camp. By the time that you're 6-7 weeks deep into fight camp, your blood work looked like shit. So it's not like me being super strict with my nutrition prevented that. Ooh, next question. What's the best coaching advice you've ever received? I could take this a lot of different ways. Probably the best advice I ever received was actually criticism, and I was told that I'm like a drill sergeant. And I heard that, and I said to myself, yeah, I am like a drill sergeant. And so I shifted my career, and I decided to start working with the military instead of working with athletes. That's probably the best coaching advice I ever got, was actually someone being critical of me. So someone criticized me, told me you're like a drill sergeant, and it made me shift my entire career into working with the military instead. And it is a much better environment for me. I am so much happier working with the military than I ever was working with athletes. And that's why I would say that's actually the best advice I ever received. So be open. Sometimes the best advice you're going to get is actually someone being critical of you. It all depends on how you take that, though. If someone criticizes you and you get defensive, that's not very useful to you. If someone criticizes you, like in my case, someone told me I'm like a drill sergeant, and I thought about it and said, yes, that's correct. Like I accepted that. I didn't get defensive. I said, yep, that's correct. I am like a drill sergeant. And so, like I said, that made me shift my career, and that's good. Like that's a positive. Next question. What are the biggest mistakes you made when first starting off as a coach? So the biggest mistakes I made when I first started off as a coach was I listened to the wrong people. Listening to the wrong people is a big problem. In fact, I see it almost every day. I even see it in my friends' IG stories, and they share stuff from people who are just spreading the worst information imaginable. And so I think one of the biggest mistakes I made is that I believed that people that were popular, people that had a big name, knew what they were talking about. That's completely false. The best coaches I've come across are the people you've never even heard of. Don't get me wrong, some of them have big names. Joe Ken, right? That's someone that has a very big name, and he knows what he's talking about. Buddy Morris, big name, someone who knows what he's talking about. But a lot of times it's people that you've never even heard of. Like if I told you, oh, Ron D'Angelo was this incredible mentor for me. You don't even know who Ron D'Angelo is. I know who he is. Toronto Raptors is really like his big thing. And then he came to Pittsburgh and was working with the Steelers and stuff. But Ron changed my life. So you can't just follow people because they have a big following, just because they have a big name. And that's probably the biggest mistake that I made as a coach, was that I was listening to the wrong people. That would be the biggest mistake I made. Now, don't get me wrong, I can list off a ton of other mistakes. Like I tried to make athletes stronger, and I I didn't understand that deep squatting my athletes might actually make some of them slower. I can name all kinds of mistakes like that, but I wouldn't list that as the biggest mistake. That's a mistake, but the most critical mistake is listening to the wrong people. You should be listening to people like Harry Mara, and a lot of people don't even know who that is. Henk Kragenhoff, I'm sure I butcher his name every single time I say it. Derek Hansen. Some of you may know these names, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people have no idea who I'm talking about when I tell them Derek Evely or Martin Bissinger. People are like, who's that? And I'm like, that's someone you should be listening to. Jake Jensen, Brett Huth. There's a lot of people who are incredibly brilliant. William Whalen, and yet they're barely known. Keir Wenham Flat, rugby strength coach. Like, that's a great resource. You should go sign up. But a lot of people are busy going, oh, well, there's this guy over here with a big name, Brad Schoenfeld or whatever, and I'm science-based. And it's like, that's cool, man. You're science-based and you want to be a coach. You're a little mixed up. So, has your coaching philosophy changed much over the years, be it training-related X and O's, or more globally speaking, your approach to coaching? It's changed massively. I don't even know where to begin on that one. That's definitely one where I could talk forever on. My coaching philosophy and how I coach, I would say that I started off being very prescriptive, and that was a major flaw in how I coached, was that I had this idea that things had to be this way. We wrote this program. We're going to stick to this program. I was by the book. And the longer I've been coaching, the more, I don't want to say flexible I am. I'm just quickly adaptable. So we come in that day and the program is, we're supposed to squat, 85% for 4 sets of 4. And I watched that first set, and I'm like, nope. You know what we're going to do instead? We're going to do 6 sets of 2, and I'm going to knock the weight down to 80%, and I'm going to pay attention to your velocity. And if they start slowing down on the third set, guess what? We're going to take more weight off. So I'm not prescriptive anymore. I watch these things, and I quickly make changes on the fly all the time. The workout never is the workout. Whatever is planned that day, I can't think of the last time we actually stuck to the plan. Don't get me wrong, if it says we're going to squat, we squat, but we change things all the time, and that doesn't necessarily always mean going down. Sometimes it's like, dude, the weight's flying off you, let's go up, because you're moving faster than I want you to. I want these to be slow, and you're just blowing the weight off your back. I mean, the barbell's bouncing and everything, and it's like, okay, we can go up in weight today. But then another day, it's supposed to be fast, and someone's grinding. So, that's one of those things where it's like, okay, we're gonna have to change this. So yeah, I've definitely changed practically everything in my philosophy as far as how I coach. And the other thing is that I spend a ton of time paying attention to velocity instead of loads. So I don't really care about percentages anymore. I don't really care about sets and reps. I don't care. The thing I look for is the quality of the movement. So if it's a day where I want the bar moving at 1 meter per second, I want the bar moving at 1 meter per second, regardless of what the load is. I don't care if it's 80% of your 1 rep max, or it's 60% of your 1 rep max, or it's 30% of your 1 rep max. The point is that the velocity is the key, so we want to make sure that there's good velocity there. So, I would love your opinion on programming BFR technique into your weekly routine, looking to target hypertrophy in usual hypertrophy training, but is there a benefit to utilize BFR for corrective work? So actually, when I was at University of Tampa, we used the BFR, and we just took regular knee wraps. We didn't buy the expensive, fancy stuff, and it's okay. It's okay. I guess it really depends on people's goals. So if you're a bodybuilder, BFR is probably good. I can see that. Like, if all you care about is just making muscle bigger, BFR has value. And you don't have to buy these super expensive pneumatic pumpy things that are incredibly overpriced. You can literally just use like knee wraps and then wrap off, you can get a feel for it. You wrap it about like 80% tight. and it'll work. Like these are even a study showing that you can literally just use knee wraps and it will work. As far as using it, I don't use it outside of rehab. So like if someone had a quad strain or a hamstring strain, I'll use some BFR because like you can still get you can still get a little bit of hypertrophy, and you can train that at a very, very low load. But for athletes, like I don't really see a value in it for someone who's healthy. If you're healthy, you're gonna get far more benefit out of actually lifting weights and lifting heavy weights. So, but don't get me wrong, like it's a great tool if you have like a nagging injury, you know. Like I injured my Lacertus fibrosis, and for a while I did some BFR with that, just because of the fact that I didn't want to load it heavy because I didn't want to tear it all the way through. I was in an accident and I lost my vastus intermedius, so I only have 3 quadricep muscles in my one leg because it literally tore through the muscle belly. So it didn't tear the tendon; it actually it tore the muscle belly itself. And the surgeon told me it was like trying to sew hamburger together, so that's why I don't have a vastus intermedius anymore. And I used BFR for a while with that, just on my left leg. I would use BFR and I would do like leg extensions and single leg squats and stuff like that to try to get that leg to grow because I couldn't load it. So that was how I integrated it. Otherwise, like if you just are using it for hypertrophy, I suppose like the way you'd want to do it is on your high rep day. So assuming you have a day where you lift heavy, obviously you don't want to use BFR. You want to make sure you continue to lift heavy, stimulate that, stimulate the type 2 fibers, and lift heavy. Anything explosive, obviously, again. But on a day where you're doing stuff like, well, if you're doing stuff like West Side, where you're doing sets of like 200 hamstring curls with a band, or 200 tricep pull downs and stuff like that, those would be good times for you to integrate the blood flow restriction. I think that would be an ideal time to implement blood flow restriction. Otherwise, outside of that, generally for healthy people, I don't think it's going to be, it's not going to make a huge difference. So anyways, yeah, there's definitely a benefit to it. I know the word choice here is corrective work. And so yes, in a rehab, prehab type setting, yes, I would go ahead and use it. So that's where I would use it, but only like if you have a nagging injury, that's the place to use it. Otherwise, it's not going to help you a whole lot like if you're capable of doing, 5x5 with 80 to 85% in the back squat, like that's going to help you a lot more than doing blood flow restricted leg extensions with a 20-pound weight. It's just because there's going to be more tension, and if we know anything about muscle growth, it's more than just time under tension. It's time under maximal tension. So you want to create a lot of tension, and then that's when time under tension matters, right? Because otherwise, if it was just time under tension, I could just sit here and flex, and my muscles would just grow because I flexed my muscles for 5 minutes a day, right? So it has to be time under tension, but it has to be maximal tension because there actually has to be load. You're not going to grow from just holding a 5-pound dumbbell here for even an hour. That's a lot of time under tension, but it's not a stimulus that's heavy enough to force the muscle to grow. So yes, if you're going to integrate blood flow restriction, I would use it as like a rehab prehab. So there you guys have it. I think that's all the questions that were asked. If you want me to clarify on anything, just go ahead and comment. I hope I covered it the way that people meant it. I know sometimes people ask a question and you interpret the question differently than the way that they meant it. But if you guys comment, I'll go ahead and try to clarify anything.